All right, Art, what do you have here?
All right, we have a display of a progression of Army uniforms from the Spanish-American War through World War I, and we're going to cover one or two of the foreign countries also. We can begin here with, this is the standard 5-button navy blue blouse that was worn by regular Army and volunteers. This was the standard outer garment worn by the troops before the advent of the tropical service uniform. Navy blue wool. Pants were a lighter blue hue kersey wool, called sky blue. Along with that, you would have been issued a pair of leggings. We'll cover that down a little bit further. Suspenders or braces to keep the trousers up. Trousers in those days all had suspenders for braces. Period pants from that period usually only had one rear pocket, usually on the right-hand side. Service cap, this would be your undress cap for garrison duty. This replaced the old model 1872 forged cap. By the time of the 1880s, they already looked into a little bit more headgear that was a little bit more comfortable for the men out in the field, so they adopted a drab-colored campaign hat in 1883. This is an 1889 pattern drab campaign hat with a model 1858 infantry cord on it. Service shirts were blue, usually made of blue flannel, 2 pockets, 3 or 4 buttons. Shirts or undershirts were also issued. These are usually made of very lightweight cotton.
And this is an example right over here.
This is pretty much of an example. This photograph probably dates after 1892 because he's armed with a Krag Jorgensen rifle. Also, you can see the cleaning rod in the rifle. So this is probably somewhere around 1895, 1896, and he's basically wearing the uniform that we just saw here, the 83 or the 89 drab campaign hat, the blouse with 5 buttons, the double row 30 caliber Krag cartridge belt. He's wearing, it has a Miriam pack on the back. You can see the shelter tent poles rolled up on the top. His bayonet, his 78 pattern haversack, his kersey pants. These are the chocolate brown or the darker leggings, and then the small service shoes. So this individual here is probably somewhere around the 1895, 1896. Now, because of the conflict in the tropical conditions that the Spanish-American War was fought, the Army started to look for, or switching the soldiers over to a little bit more comfortable uniform. So in June of 1898, right in the middle of hostilities, they started to look into a tropical or a khaki service uniform. Pretty much they took the ideas from the British, which have been fighting in the Boer Wars, and they copied their uniform to some extent. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. And this is the second pattern of khaki uniform that was issued out to the men beginning in 1899. So from 1899 onward, soldiers in the tropical conditions could be issued a summer weight uniform. And this was pretty much the type of uniform that was prevalent in the Philippines during the Philippine insurrection from about 1899 to 1902. And it's made of a cotton drilling, removable buttons. They were still using a gilt buttons. Branch of service was designated by the colors of the shoulder straps. Light blue for infantry, yellow for cavalry, red for artillery. There was green for medical corps. Staff officers sometimes wore black, but this was still using an old corps coloring to designate branch of service. The campaign hat also went through a little bit of a modification where, for better ventilation, they went back to using a small vent on the side of the campaign hat. So this is a model 1899 hat. Also, at the same time this came out, the infantry color was changed from the sky blue to white. So the hat cord changed, and it then went back to light blue in 1902. The color went back. So this was the campaign hat that would have been worn. You would have seen it during the Philippine insurrection. By 1904, the hat also underwent another change, and they went back to the older style hat, removing the vents. And by now they were issuing, or it was actually being constructed with a chin strap built right into it, a grommet. These are your standard type service shoes that were worn. These kind of probably maybe predate the Spanish-American War by a few years, but service shoes from that era are very hard to find.
Oh yeah.
Like it says there, usually 2 speed laces, very high, tall ankle boot. I believe these have been identified as model 1876 shoes, but I'm not really certain on that. I mean, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
They may also be of commercial manufacturing or use by like National Guard. So,
but it's close.
It's a pretty close. Okay. It's an original period shoe from the 1890s, and pretty darn close to the type of service shoes that were worn by enlisted men or soldiers in the army.
Okay.
Here's your
leggings. What are the leggings?
Yes, these are the model 1898s. They were then starting to be made out of the tan canvas material like the uniforms. The earlier ones were like a chocolate brown, a reddish brown. But these are your standard leggings for the Spanish-American War. These will come up almost to your knees.
Wow.
They were usually just to protect the lower section of your trousers from briars, brambles being ripped, being torn.
Yeah.
Also, in 1899, there was an earlier helmet, a model 1880 summer helmet, which fell out of use. But in 1899, they reintroduced the summer helmet, once again based on the British helmet being used during the Boer Wars. These were to be issued out to men in the tropical conditions, and there is some use, so they do see some of these being used in the Philippines during the insurrection, but they were never really a popular headgear with the United States troops.
Why? Why were they?
A foreign style. I mean, it's just really, they really never caught on. Usually the campaign hat was pretty much what was worn. The rest of the items here are pretty basic. This is your model 1878 round oblique canteen. Your 1874 tin cup. This is your 1874 mess kit. Because of the shortages of these, the Army went outside the box in some respects. This is what's called an emergency issue or a supplemental type of mess kit. They didn't use these round ones also.
Yeah.
Your utensil set is what's called a model 1874. Cartridge belts. This is a single row for the .45 caliber trapdoor Springfield. Usually had 50 rounds. They were in blue because khaki was not an issue color in any of the equipment at that time.
Okay.
This is probably dates to 1899 or later because the belt is now in khaki. This is a double row belt, meaning it will carry double the amount of ammunition. So this is a 100-round belt, and it's for the .30 caliber Krag Jorgensen rifle or carbine.
Okay. So this hasn't become a fad yet.
Well, I was once told that the khaki equipment started to be issues, but I know at least with the belts. The khaki belt started to appear at the same time that the khaki uniform appeared.
Okay.
Prior to that, there are 100-round ammunition belts also in the navy blue.
All right. Okay.
But the khaki belt, as in that photo, that soldier's wearing a navy blue belt, the khaki belts are somewhere around 1899.
So late 1800s then. Okay.
Late 1800s. Condiment bags, one for your coffee, one for your salt, and one for your sugar would be carried in your haversack. There was 2 pattern haversacks. This is the earlier one. It's model 1878. It's a smaller version of the haversack. Contain your mess kit, everything would have been put inside it. And then they made a larger one starting in 1898, which is a little bit bigger.
How can you tell the differences in the year?
By the size. The 1898 bag is slightly larger. The 1878 bag is usually a smaller one.
Okay.
This is your standard Army issue blanket. This is your model 1885 Army blanket. And then as far as carrying your items, the blanket bag, model 1878, which is what this is.
Okay.
Really, essentially,
there's a big, huge,
the
size.
It's almost a very, very large haversack with straps. Opens up to one big bag. You could put they call it a blanket bag because you could put your bedding and some items in there. They tried to, and this was kind of a revolutionary item here of the time. This is called a Miriam pack. They were not very popular with the troops. In fact, I don't think very few of them were probably even carried into any kind of combat during the Spanish-American War.
Why is that?
They were just not popular with the men. Carried along your pair of poles for your shelter tent, which is not, I don't have a shelter tent here, but these doubled. But the interesting thing about this bag is this one is pretty much in pristine, unissued condition. And inside of it, it still has its original directions on assembling the bag, which I think is pretty unique to see a set of these still inside of the pack. Although it's stenciled and looks like it was prepared to be issued out to somebody, apparently it had very little use by this individual. But the Miriam pack was used by a lot of the volunteer troops, but not so much in the regular army. You don't see much use of it in the regular army. Mostly the blanket bag, like it says, and there's a good view of the blanket bag. It's pretty much just a very, very large, haversack.
Yeah.
The Spanish-American War showed the shortcomings of the uniforms and equipment of the United States Army. So by 1902, we were already starting to progress and morph into more of the familiar olive drab uniform. So this here is your basic setup here now for the U.S. Army.
Okay.
By post-turn of the century, when we started to adopt an olive drab. Once again, wool was still the primary material made for the garments. They did continue to make a cotton cloth uniform in olive drab wool for summer weight, but this is your standard uniform kit here for soldiers entering the First World War in 1917.
Okay. And this will be in the second video coming up. Hold on one second.